Yo, 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 what's up, my dudes? Welcome to the first episode of a sort of Coalitions and Nations Revisited. This time hopefully with all episode, I'm joined by NickDaMan.
Hello.
And we're gonna kick it off with the US and NORAD, which is more or less the same thing. I don't think it was the first one I did back in the day. I think it was Red Dragons, where I also got a bit salty over how trash they are. But you know, me getting salty, that's nothing new, is it? So, I guess we'll just get right into it, right?
Yeah, I mean, why not? Do we want to look at NORAD first then? Or
I mean,
do we
yeah,
want to
I
look at
guess
like
we'll
US
look at NORAD and then we just, for each tab or something, we just show which noticeable units Canada adds to US. You know, since it's more or less the same thing anyways.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. All right, so starting off a little logistics tab, I suppose, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing really out of the ordinary. The Abrams is a pretty good command tank, I'd say.
Yep, you got 3 top armor, pretty decent front armor, and a
And good
gun
mobility.
with... Yeah, you can dodge bombers, dodge cluster bombers pretty well.
Yeah, that's one thing that the
which is really what you want.
Yeah, and that's one thing that the Chieftain doesn't offer, which is, I think, another relatively cheap command tank with 3 top armor, but is slow as fuck. And the speed is actually like a big deal, like Nick said, when you want to dodge bombers. And the Humvee is like, I think, actually the best 110 point cheap CV because it has 10 HP and the Browning.
Yeah, you can survive some hits from... Let's see, you got 0 armor, so you can take up to a 4 AP autocannon round.
Yes,
and
a single
still
one.
get out with 2 HP. So that's something that you will not see on like a UAZ or something.
But I think most notably you can survive mortar shells at least a bit more effectively. I mean, it basically ends up allowing you to get your cheap out before it dies. It'll just get damaged instead. And the Browning's actually surprisingly effective too for like dealing with like MG only helicopters or something. And if you're in a forest and they fly directly over you, you actually have a good chance of killing it.
Yep. It's a nice little investment. I think I'd always go with the Humvee over the M151A1 CP.
Yeah, and
or even
obviously
the
over the Iltis,
is like slightly faster, but it's
Yeah, but I mean
the trade-off's not worth it. The 50 cal is great defense to have, especially if you're... I mean, it's not like a super common scenario, but if you have like a line infantry squad approaching your CV across open ground, the Humvee CV can effectively suppress them before they can enter into that 525 meter AT range.
Exactly.
Not that you should be in that scenario very often, but
if it comes down
to
where
it's
necessary. There'll be that 1 in 100 scenario where it'll save you your match or something.
Yeah.
And you have your I think the 30-point truck is another thing that Canada adds for NORAD, which isn't a huge deal in team games, but I think in 1 versus 1s it's a lot more flexible than a Hammett.
Yep.
I think that's really it.
I mean, what else is there to talk about? Yeah, Canadian command infantry don't add much. I'd probably run, if I wanted to bring command infantry, I'd bring TACOMs and the Black Hawk, most likely, for that flexibility at the start.
Decent chopper, and the minigun is like at least something, right?
You can always bring them back to spawn, load up an infantry squad, and flex them around the map. It doesn't. People don't do that very often, but I find it can be kind of useful, especially if you're running a card of Rangers in the M35 and you want to like reposition them at the flanks. You can purchase them at your spawn, use your Black Hawk, which should already be at your spawn if you're using command infantry as your spawn sector CV, and send it around a flank.
That is actually a good point that I never thought about. I usually just I use it for either just flank securing or a suicide job or anything like that.
Yeah. People don't usually bother reloading infantry into transports, but that's something I've done a few times when I've screwed around with my NORAD decks.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the infantry tab then? I don't think there's a whole lot more
I'd say so, yeah.
Alright, so let's see.
Should we just quickly go from top to bottom? I guess all engineers
why don't we run over like a normal US infantry lineup, and then after we're done building that, we can compare that with how it would look if we were to switch it up with the Canadian infantry lineup.
That sounds good.
All right.
So I think what you definitely want is at least, probably even two base riflemen in the 3 armor M113, right?
I mean, the M113A3 is excellent, especially because a lot of the meta decks have 10-point line infantry with 16 AP launchers. So the difference from the 2 frontal armor to 3 frontal armor on your 5-point transports is actually really significant. And against I don't think I'd ever call it like a better transport than the Zelda, just because the Zelda gets the ridiculous amount of energies.
But I think it's.
But
I think after that it might be the best one. There's still the South Korean transport for 5 points with 2 armor, but it has a Browning and a second MG, which is like kind of a worse Zelda. And if I'm not wrong, I think the second MG also has no turret, but I'm not 100% certain on that.
And the second MG is the M60, which
also it's not a Browning. It's not a Browning. Yeah,
but it has the extended range, which means you can fire with 2 MGs at a range increment further than the Zelda would normally be able to. It's rather nice. But we should focus on
I was just about to
US and Canadian infantry. But yeah, I'd probably bring 2 cards of riflemen in the M113A3.
Probably downwetted, honestly.
Maybe. I think a playstyle difference between you and me. I personally like to upvet my infantry maybe a little bit more than I should, because I prefer to have my infantry be more cost efficient as opposed to more card efficient.
Yeah, but I
can totally understand taking 2 cards downvetted, because this is primarily going to be fodder.
First of all, it's fodder
a lot.
And in forests, the 5-pointers are gonna do the majority of the damage against infantry.
That's very true.
But I mean, it's like,
especially when they're survivable like they are here.
If you're taking 2 cards, it's like 32 versus 40. It's not really gonna be a deal breaker. So if you up at both and you find yourself you run out of them too quickly, just down with them. It's not really a huge thing, but.
Yeah. All right. While we're looking at the Rifleman tab, we can also potentially bring in Rifleman 90 for Forest AT. And I think in a US deck, that's going to be actually the best AT you can bring in. Yeah, aside from small, which is kind of niche, but it's worth mentioning because small can actually be fairly efficient. It's just after the adjustment to 20 points as opposed to 15, they're a little bit less efficient than they used to be.
And they also have a rather low availability of just 12.
That's true.
Although I think in a US deck they would be 13 or 14. I think 13 because of the 10% availability bonus. But yeah,
that I think is correct. I think it's 13 and 9.
I think it is so.
I'll check the availability really quick. But for the most part, I'd probably avoid the U.S. Marines 90. They're a bit pricey for what they offer. They're not terrible, but they don't get a good 5-point transport. The 15-point transport's okay, but then you're paying 45 points for, I don't know. They adjusted it down to 2 armor, right? It's no longer 3 armor as well.
Yeah, it's 2 armor
on the
now.
LVTP 7A1. Yeah, that's another really, really big thing. The difference between 2 and 3 frontal armor was kind of huge. For
an IFV.
Yeah.
I think they're still, though, the best option you get if you want like an actual infantry squad that can hold on its own. Or if you want city fights. Because Delta Force with the nerf are just And you also get more per card. And I think for team games, especially in the 3v3, 4v4 area, your infantry doesn't, or your deck generally doesn't have to be that cost efficient anymore. And I think you can spend that amount of points on Marines 90 in the LVTP. Because the LVTP or grenade launchers in general are, if you can't counter them, they're one of the biggest fuck you type of unit where you just get fucked so hard if you can't deal with it immediately.
Yeah, that's true. You can also potentially screen the LVTP with regular riflemen and M113s, because the 3 armor transports can still soak AT. And while they're on the reload, you can push in the LVTPs behind them in forest-style engagements, at which the stun lock from the grenade launcher will fuck up basically any infantry you have to deal with.
Yeah, but I think I'd still take Razzmann 90. Personally, I like to take a card of Razzmann 90 in the 5-pointer as well. Sometimes only taking one card of the base Razzmann, depending on what the rest of my deck looks like. Just mix like 2 or 3 squads of base Razzmann with 1 squad of Razzmann 90 to have like that 1 or 2 squads that can deal with heavier IFVs in forests.
In that case, if you're going to bring 3 cards of line infantry, though, I probably would upvet them because you're still going to get 20 or 16 riflemen.
Yeah, I think either upvet them or take 1 card of each and downvet them both. I think.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I even after the price hike, I still like to bring small in my US deck. Just because the 15 rounds a minute on the long range accurate AT can be quite nice to have for knocking out tanks or whatever vehicles in a deck where you kind of lack hard hitting reliable AT.
Yeah. They're also pretty good sort of defenders for like choke points or cities.
Yeah.
But I think in forest grinds they can be a bit finicky with the 5 HP and rather expensive cost now.
Yeah, they need to be screened, which is the problem.
Yeah, you really have to be careful with them.
I'd normally run them in the Humvee or the LVTP 7A1. I wouldn't bother with the 5-point transport because it's too
one
slow
armor
and unarmored.
And definitely not a helicopter.
Yeah, no, not cost efficient. I'd normally bring him in the Humvee and then maybe send them in with like a card of Rangers because I think that's the only other really effective wheeled deployment infantry that you get in a US deck. Aside from maybe Delta Force, but Delta Force is not really cost efficient at this point.
I think in that case you might only take
adjustment.
If you take small, I think you probably also only either you want to take out the Razzmann 90 completely, or you want to take only 1 card of each Razzmann and Razzmann 90.
Right, because you like to run. You've been running light riflemen in your US
but
deck.
I think that's not in team games generally. Light rifleman is like a unit that people like to meme on, especially because Dick Cheney swears on them. People automatically think, well, they must be trash. Especially the base ones, especially in 1 versus 1. The base one in Humvee, you get 16 of them or 12 up at it. They actually can do a lot of work. For 20 points, you get a squad that can sort of effectively hold down a town against upcoming infantry and IFVs, and for like 40 points you get 2 squads of them where sure they only have 10 AP but they only need to hit 2 or 3 times for any IFV, and for that price they're really good, and just that the enemy knows, oh shit, there's ATGMs in there, already makes them more careful and not as aggressive.
It's really the primary purpose of that ATGM is not to like reach out and touch tanks. It's to prevent infantry that's being supported by like those 2-3 frontal armor cheap transports from mowing them down. Because those dragons, the accuracy scaling causes them to be quite accurate at ranges where enemy IFVs, not autocannon IFVs, but when you have
I mean even
MG
IFVs,
transports approaching
because
the town. But I mean they're 1575 meter range on the base light rifleman. Or would you advocate for the light rifleman 90? Because I'm always thinking of the base light rifleman.
I think rifleman 90 also have their place. I think they're also decent, but 10 points price increase is big. Just if you actually want to efficiently or reliably deal with IFVs only, pretty much, I guess, then you could take the Rifleman 90. And I guess in like mid-tier type of games, like 2 versus 2s, they're probably still place, but 3v3 upwards, I think neither of them are really that great, unless you're playing meme games.
I wouldn't really bother with light rifleman 90 in 1v1 decks, just because they're too expensive for the. I think they're just too pricey, honestly. I'd stick with the base light rifleman because you're going to see a lot more infantry play in small player count games where you don't have like a whole lot of artillery saturation.
Yeah. Then what do you think about the Bradleys?
I quite like the Bradleys. I remember experimenting around with bringing the M2A2 Bradley with stingers.
What? Yes,
stingers aren't bad, but they're. I don't know. I never got a huge amount of success from the stingers, although having a Bradley was quite nice. I actually preferred to bring the the Stinger A, the cheaper Stinger with it, because I mean, for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, you're not going to be shooting down planes with these. The
With
range is so low
yeah,
that
with which Bradley? The M2A2
the M2A2,
okay.
the M2A2 is what I would stick with. I'd bring in the Stinger A with the M2A2 Bradley. I'd bring them in upfitted as well, just because I wouldn't deploy a huge amount of them, but they can be nice for holding off parts of the map. I mean, also your selection is going to depend on whether or not you're going to bring in the Recon Bradley later. But
Yeah.
that's maybe something to talk about in a little bit. But the Recon Bradley is excellent for zoning, just because of that stealth. It allows it to work that TOW 2 a little bit better when it needs to deal with heavier targets like tanks, where you're concerned about it being spotted and nailed at maxed range. But the cheaper M2A2 Bradley can be quite nice for holding off mid-tier tanks, the type that it can take out in one hit, which I want to say is 12 fav? No, 11. 11
11
armor
it
in the
is,
low with a
yes.
TOW 2 and
11
25 AP.
front armor 1-shot and 17 front armor 2-shot. And for
Yeah.
a 3-shot, I think up to 20 armor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What I've actually been experimenting recently is I took the Stinger C, I believe, in the M2A1. Basically just purely for dealing with other IFVs, really, or other
Yeah.
light vehicles. And then additionally, kind of base Razzmann in the M2A2
Mm-hmm.
for team
Yeah,
games.
I
think in my 1-versus-1 decks, and I think that's US only, not in NORAD. I think I only have the Stinger. I think it's also C in the M2A1.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah. The M2A2 in team games, I think, is quite strong because in those larger scale games where you can afford to bring out several M2A2 Bradleys, you're worried a lot less about an enemy tank or super heavy getting the first shot off and just
yes.
eliminating your only Bradley. When you have like 3 of them clustered, there's no way a tank is going to be able to deal with the Bradleys before the Bradleys are able to deal with the tank. Especially because on those larger scale maps, your engagement distances are increased just because of the way the maps themselves are actually laid out. And so I would say it's much more valid to, at least in larger games, bring the M2A2 Bradley.
Yeah.
But in smaller 1v1s, I'd say the M2A1 Bradley is definitely an alternative, just because you're shaving 10 points off the price, which is pretty significant. Although I really hate units in 1v1 that have poor optics, just because
that is definitely a big deal.
They're
but I'd say that generally
units.
I think
it's not a huge deal for infantry transports though, as long as you keep the infantry nearby, because the infantry will still have medium optics.
It's a much bigger deal on tanks or something. But I think in a 1-versus-1 it certainly can be a scenario where it's gonna fuck you up.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that there's a pretty big armor difference between the M2A2 Bradley and the M2A1. The M2A2 will quite reliably deal with other IFVs.
That are not like Martyr 2 or something. Like autocannon wise, I mean. But generally I think you don't really want to get in autocannon range with either Bradley.
I mean, you should still always be engaging other IFVs with the TOWs on the Bradleys, just because the AP will... The M2A1 is 20 AP. That knocks out 6 fav?
6 armor, yes. 1 shot
so
and 2 shots, 12 armor.
Yeah, a Martyr 2 could still quite potentially fuck up an M2A1 Bradley, but yeah.
Yeah, the M2A2 at least still has a decent
and...
chance at killing other IFVs if they get into autogun range with that 5 armor.
Yeah.
Alright.
Yep.
Delta Fares.
No. I would like them.
People,
they used to have a place.
Yes, people always used to be like, "Oh my god, Eugen gift Delta Force, the Carl Gustav M2, they had it in ALB." But before that, they were fine. For 25 points, you got the MP5 and SMG on Elite Forces. Elite Infantry is really, really strong. Sure, you didn't get the best MG, but main thing was you got an MP5, which made them very, very efficient. At least US for US
they
infantry,
had a role
I guess.
In clearing towns, and now they don't have a role.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
if they had been given small, I could see the 30-point price being justified, but
yeah, they'd be like shy ahead a bit.
So they're just kind of mediocre.
I think
don't do anything well.
There's one scenario I could see them being useful, and that's just simply for sneaking around the map, and that's only because they're faster than Rangers. That's the only one that I can think of, and just trying to snipe or kill units from behind. They're still a lot more efficient at killing infantry in forests, for example, should they come up against something. But it's just not really worth a slot, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother bringing them. You have better options, and I'd take a card of light rifleman over that. I'd take any form of Bradley with any form of other unit pairing instead of that.
And if you want any infantry on wheels that can fight somewhat easily, you can always use your Rangers.
Yeah.
Assault engineers, they're just...
No, avoid them. Too fragile. If you want something like assault engineers for clearing out other infantry, you're actually going to be a lot better off taking small, because although small will have half the HE power at 2, small are versatile in that they won't get fucked over by IF cheap transports in the same way assault engineers will. And also the ground range, the ground attack range is huge for the Flash, because the Flash actually has really, really poor accuracy, and even at forest fight ranges, I think it's only going to scale up to like 60%. And when your assault engineers get panicked, they're not going to be hitting. Whereas if you have small in a forest range with that 875 meter base range and 70% base accuracy, as well as the shock training, the accuracy is going to scale up to something like 95, 98% in the forests, and you're never going to have to worry about them missing. And then the suppression on that first shot hit is going to allow you to potentially chain shots in.
It should be noted, though, that the assault engineers have insane burst damage. They have 4 rounds ready before they have to reload. But like Nick said, you get fucked over by like any kind of transport or IFV. And with nearly every deck having like cheap infantry and any kind of decent 5-pointer, chances are just that you get fucked over too easily, and they're effectively a dead card.
Yeah, you're just not going to get your value out of them.
And they're basically forest fighters only. I guess maybe city fighters as well, but it's awkward with CQC and that stuff, so I wouldn't really bother with that. So they're on top of them just being too easily outclassed, they're just also very, very niche in the first place. Even among pure infantry killers, they're even more niche.
Yeah. All right, well, I think we're done talking about the U.S. infantry lineup, so why don't we look a little bit at what Canada can potentially add, right?
Yes.
Okay, Canadian Airborne. In my NORAD decks, this is kind of the mainstay of my
base or 90?
Sorry, 85, 90, 90.
Yeah.
Just because the Cargo 7 is not terrible, but you really want to get the better MG. And
although they have an assault rifle, and I think the battle rifle on the base ones is actually, I think, a bit better on shock infantry, but I think it's not as big of a deal as it would be on line infantry.
Yeah, the MG definitely was going to outweigh any difference you would see in the battle rifle performance, though. But the main thing is having 875 meter range shoulder launched AT can be really nice, especially when you need to reach out and touch transports when they're trying to provide fire support.
Or even side shot tanks.
That too. You can catch people off. You can catch people by surprise because it's a step above what you normally see from infantry AT.
They're just very, very solid shock infantry. I don't think they're like really great or trash. They're just solid. They have a good.
It's a good
wheel transport
fighting infantry in a deck whose weakness would otherwise be infantry. It allows you to actually get some good use out of your infantry tab, I'd say.
And the other noticeable thing, obviously, the TH495 with the Canadian rifles.
Also,
used to be really, really strong.
Airborne in the Bison as opposed to the Grizzly.
Oh yeah, Bison.
Although you get the 50 cal.
2 armor is a big deal. I think
the armor is a huge deal.
We've talked about that enough.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. TH495 with Canadian rifles 85.
Just a very, very solid combo. It should be noted that the TH has medium optics and has actually very good speed as well, off-road speed. It used to be 15 points with 2 armor. Jesus, those were the times. Oh my god. It was even better, but it's still very good, even though it costs 20 points now, when something like the KFE, which is very comparable, costs 15 points, but it has 1 less armor, I believe, and not medium optics. Just a very, very, very good combination.
All right. Probably the last 2 units we should talk about here, Erics and Highlanders 90. What do you think of them, Raz?
Eric's not a fan of. Just fist squads in general, unless they are small, are most of the time just not worth it. They die way too quickly. They don't really have the availability. You only get 12 of them as well. Card efficient, inefficient, cost inefficient. They're like decent
You
for
do
just.
still get that 25 AP launcher though
You do,
on a
you do,
15
but
point unit, and you can potentially bring them in a 5-point transport.
you
For
can.
so for yeah, you can bring them in with the M113.
I mean,
as well.
yes, you can, but it's just you run out of them quickly. They die very quickly. Just fire support. They aren't very mobile for being regular. If the first shot doesn't hit and they get shot at, they're basically panicked and worthless. I think their only role is to either just spam them in forest, hope the enemy doesn't mortar them, and they suddenly just one-shot a tank because you have 4 of them or something, or just to like defend towns against on the flanks or something where you shouldn't expect like a full force of something to come up. Otherwise, I'd always take Highlanders 90.
Probably pair it up with a squad of Canadian Rifles 85 and the TH49. Is it the TH? It's a 495, right?
495, yes.
Pair it up with one of those and throw it in the forest.
I think you can put them into like a mech deck. Maybe a moto
in the
deck.
mech deck you could definitely slap them in.
But
I could
other than
definitely
that,
see having trouble to putting it in the NORAD deck.
Highlanders 90, I think, are just a better option.
Yeah. It's still kind of unfortunate that they're at the same price point as French Legion 90, but
I mean,
they
to be
don't
fair,
get the
French Legion 90 probably should be 30 points.
That's true.
They are just incredibly strong. But even if they are comparatively just objectively worse, they're just still very good. Simply for being 10-man Eric's squads. Just being able to tank a tank shell. And still being able to get the second or potentially third Eric's out in the forest or something is just very valuable. They're cost inefficient against other infantry, but in a defensive position in a building, they can easily hold on their own.
All right.
Yeah. I think that's all.
Yeah.
The other thing
Pioneer's not really worth talking about, I feel.
No, neither is the Javelin or anything else. No. And the base Highlanders are just, except for the speed, literally worse than base Canadian Airborne. I guess you get 3 more Calgo submissiles, but it's still a bit funny as to how terrible it is.
Yep.
That's not even the speed. The speed is the same, right? Okay. On to support then.
All right. So notable U.S. units in the support tab.
I don't think there are any. Are there?
Patriot.
Patriot. The Patriot. You didn't play when it first got introduced, right? I don't think I was around. That was 2016.
That lower reload rate, right?
Yes, it basically shot as basically like a buck or a hawk does. As soon as the first one hit or missed, it immediately sent out the second one. It was ridiculous. I think it even had a bit more range, but I'm not 100% certain on that. It also wasn't prototyped. I think.
Broken.
But yeah, obviously a very strong unit and a must take. I think only
must take in team games.
In 1 versus 1,
I would still take it in my 1v1 deck purely because it allows you to just absolutely shut down air control in such a huge area. And although it's a very costly unit, played correctly, you won't be losing your Patriot because it has 10 HP, it's wheeled, so you can move it around fairly quickly, and the range and accuracy means that you're going to be you should get your return on investment, if not directly from killing enemy aircraft, because it's kind of a long reload, but you will stun bombers and you will stun ATGM planes before they fuck up your units on the ground, and that's really what makes the Patriot shine in comparison with other radar AAA, is that they will save your other units as opposed to just punishing your opponent.
Yeah, or even just make your opponent not buy planes because he knows you have a Patriot and just says, fuck it, then I just won't buy planes. And that can be worth a shit ton, depending on what deck the enemy plays.
Yep.
And generally, I think most of the time, even when 1 versus 1, you want to play with a FOB. I've tried playing with like a NORAD decks that are kind of more like on the cheaper side of overall unit cost and playstyle without the unicorns, where I think you can play without a Patriot, but I think if you want to take the maximum out of the deck, you should probably even in 1v1 take it, and then probably on veteran as well, because
yeah, you have units like the Patriot or like any radar AA you have in a US deck is going to be really supply intensive, and then you also have all the TOW carriers, the Bradley, um, both in the Recon tab and in the infantry tab, as well as considering the fact that you're going to have a longbow to resupply, because the longbow is a must-have in any US or NORAD deck.
yeah. And then the other supply intensive unit, the Atacams.
Yeah, not justifiable to bring in a 1v1 deck, but in team games, it's incredibly good at counter battering.
It is ridiculously good, and even at just killing super heavies, or it's depending on the map. Sometimes there's just not a lot of different, or not a lot of forest to retreat to for enemy super heavies, and that can really fuck up your opponent. And it should probably be just one per card and probably be more expensive, but I think in general the idea of this unit or the concept is not hugely terrible. It is something that you can avoid, but it is just, I think it should probably like one per card, maybe only one shot at ready and then reload for another 60 seconds, even if it says it has 2 at shit. But I think it isn't that huge of a deal when it comes to the overall US or NORAD deck. I think if it was unprototyped or accessed, or in, let's say, Israel, Yugoslavia, and shit, it would be a different deal. But I think it's like people like to complain about it, but I think it's overall sort of fine.
All right. I mean, everybody knows about the Chaparrals. They're really solid long-range IRAA pieces.
Don't take the 40-point ones.
No,
it used to be even worse with only 30% accuracy, but I think in 1v1s you could take the 55-point ones. In team games, I'd always take the 70-point ones.
Yep.
That's because, again, in team games you generally don't have to be as cost efficient. Or like you can generally spend more points on a smaller front line.
I'd probably still run the 70-point Chaparral in my US 1v1 decks, but I could definitely see taking the 55-point.
Yeah, I think both are fine. It depends on how much space you have, I think, because you want to up at them with only 50% accuracy, and then you only get 3, and they are relatively easy to kill because they have to be somewhat close to the front line, and they have no top armor, and don't have the best off-road speed. They can sometimes be awkward to maneuver around.
US tube artillery, Paladin is like one of the worst.
Yeah, it has long as reload time between the individual shots.
Yeah, one of the worst.
And then even
I wouldn't bother bringing.
And a pretty bad artillery. Maximum range.
Yep.
The Avenger.
Pivad's is alright. Avengers.
It's like
okay for a wheeled opener, but if you're running a US deck, you don't have a strong wheeled opener anyways. I probably wouldn't bother bringing the Avenger for that reason. Pivad's is solid.
Yeah, Pivad's is very solid.
One unit I'd like to talk about briefly is the Hawk Pip 3. It doesn't see a lot of play because it's overshadowed by the Patriot in terms of radar AA capabilities. But having 3,500 meter range on a AA piece, although
but I mean,
not hugely important as its own, and just because you don't typically end up seeing engagements occurring at that range. What is worth noting is the fact that high HE power combined with accuracy scaling means that the Hawk Pip 3 will very, very reliably tag aircraft at closer range, and
helicopter, not planes.
Helicopters. Accuracy scaling doesn't occur against planes, but for nailing helicopters, you're going to be instantly stunning anything you hit, and you're going to be hitting things very reliably once they're in range.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's very, very.
It has terrible off-road speed, terrible autonomy, terrible armor. You don't want it to be at the front line your helicopters because you can't retreat it fast enough if you have to. So the 3,500 meter range against helicopters coming into play is incredibly rare.
Fair enough, I suppose. Shall we?
I think it's just. Sorry, but I think it's just also overshadowed by the NOAA, which is, in my opinion, the only Maybe with the Eots Hawk, the only hawk worth taking, but the Hawk Whip 3 is just you basically spend a lot of points on the anti-helicopter capability, and you're just never gonna use that. And I think if you're in the situation where you have to use it, meaning you're pushed that far back, you probably lost already. But yeah, there's also the M110 in case you're wanting to copy Firestarter, but I don't think you have the space to take so many non-AA support units in the US deck.
Right, Canada now? Your Patriot, your IRA piece, like a Chaparral, and then probably Wolverine if you're playing NORAD.
Oh, and the mortar, of course.
Canadian units. Yeah, Mortar, Patriot, IRA.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. Yeah.
ADATs.
Wolverine. ADATs?
Okay, yeah, sorry. We'll start with the Wolverine. I'd say the Wolverine is probably one of the most important units in your NORAD deck. It's armored, for one. It's fast.
Cheap. Very
and it
cheap.
Can fire up to 3 missiles, which means you get into some scenarios where you have one Wolverine shoot down a plane, which it really, really shouldn't because the accuracy is just terrible. But I have it happen over and over again when I'm playing against NORAD decks.
Or you're having Wolverine missing 3 shots in a row against the Hind. It's like that both things happen relatively frequently, and I think if you play often enough with the Wolverine in your deck, you have just as many "oh fuck this shitty unit" moments as you have "oh I love this shitty unit" moments.
But it's 35 points.
Yes, I think when people
and it's armored, which means you can deploy them in pairs, and when you deploy them in pairs, they work wonders.
Yeah. And I think when people complain about it being so bad, I think they forget how cheap it actually is, and that includes me. Sometimes I also curse over it, but in hindsight, it's fucking 35 points, and for that, it's really good.
I would also upvet them just because.
Oh yeah, of course.
Just because of the accuracy, I would recommend upvetting them. 6 isn't a lot, especially at 35 points, but yeah, deploy them in pairs, upvet them. You will see success with that unit.
If you deploy them in pairs, you probably want to split them somewhat up because chances are that they can get fucked by rocket pods of a helicopter that rushes towards them if they both miss the first shot, and then they get both stunned at the same time if they get spotted. So split them slightly up if you use them in pairs.
Yeah, but deploy them in the same region.
Yeah.
Just because one individual Wolverine may have difficulties dealing with something like a Hind, but as long as they can back each other up, deployed in pairs, they'll do really well. Other units, ADATs, Centurion Marksman. Centurion Marksman's...
It's a very decent spag that's just very slow.
Yeah, I'd still probably take the
That's the biggest thing. Yeah, I think in a NORAD deck,
if you really want the longer range spag, then
I think in a 1v1, there's a scenario where you want a Centurion maybe because it's just so much more flexible as in reliable
as well.
Mainly because of the range.
It can also soak rocket pods pretty well because of the 6 front armor.
Yes.
And that'll also allow you to survive against.
Up to 19.
Strikes will still kill it. So the only seed you're gonna see that's gonna survive that is 16 AP seed, which means
Super Cobra.
Super Cobra, and I think that's it.
And against infantry, you'll survive Calculus of M2. So it is actually an okay, well, quote unquote okay fire support unit if it has to come down to that. And then the ADATs, probably one of the biggest noob traps in the game. It is a ridiculously strong unit, but it's also a plane magnet, artillery magnet. Especially it dies, especially rocket pod planes if the enemy has them.
It's too fragile. It's too fragile for what it offers.
I mean, in the ideal scenario, if you have like a Patriot around that you can protect your ADATs with, but it's 230 points. Although it should be said that in the long run, the ADATs can easily make its money, bring back its money in terms of kills.
You just need to be very, very careful with it.
And it's very micro. One of the most micro-intensive units, more so than super heavy, I'd say.
Yeah, it's. I'd tend to avoid it.
Only really take it if you like skilled and you just want to have some wacky fun or some wacky tech or something. Other than that, it's not really worth it. Or unless you're playing Canada National, I guess. Or maybe NORAD support. How about that?
Who in their right mind would ever play
I did recently, but I DC'd 5 minutes into the game.
Oh my gosh. Okay. But yeah, in a NORAD 1v1 deck, I'd probably just run the 40-point US Mortar, Patriot, Pivads, and Wolverine, and you get a pretty solid lineup with. I mean, you'd lack long range IRA in that case, but I normally run the DAP in my NORAD decks and use them for helo hunting if I need them. Good. We're really going through this very slowly, aren't we?
Oh yeah, we are. Holy shit.
How far in are we at this point?
40 minutes.
We've covered the first 3 tabs. We need to pick this up.
Yeah, let's figure some ways. Okay, let's go over to tanks.
Tanks, M1A2, hardest hitting tank in the game.
Hang on. First of all, the whole M1 series is just very decent. M1 and M1 IP basically. M1 Abrams basically for killing infantry and fire support in forest. 15 armor, medium optics for 65 points is very good. Don't kill tanks with it, but it's good against IVs and infantry with the 2 MGs that every Abrams has. M1 IP is just a good, solid workhorse tank. Not the greatest against other tanks, but in close water engagements, you can make it work if you micro a bit. M1A1 just a decent tank, and then
yeah, the whole M1A1 line is pretty solid. The only issue I have with it is that it's fairly low availability across the board. You don't get a second card of super heavies, so
you have the HC to make up with it somewhat, and I mean the general US deck has probably access to the most anti-tank tools in all kind of planes, helicopters, and even support. So you don't really need a second card.
That's accurate. MBT 70, great clearing out infantry.
Basically a BMPT.
Yeah, basically.
It just doesn't have the armor, but it can engage on longer engagements with the 5 HE gun, as opposed to the BMPT. M8 HGS is not really a great unit, but it's a fun little fucking 13 RPM, 17 AP, 65% accuracy tank.
Knocking out IFVs.
Yeah, and then like fucking around in flanks. Just you have to be very careful that you don't just get one shot by any tank, really.
Or infantry squad. But
or that,
if you can keep it at a distance, it can do pretty good, nice things for you. But
especially like against mech or motor decks where you don't see heavy tanks, can do in theory a lot of work.
Yep. Have you already talked about the M1 IP? I think you did, right?
Yeah, just a decent workhorse tank.
Yep. And then you have the Leopard C2 Mexus, which is probably the only interesting unit Canada brings.
Yeah, probably. Generally,
it's a very well-rounded medium tank.
You generally want to take it over the M1 IP. You have the extra range on the gun, which is big against other tanks. You have the extra RPM, which is in general just very, very good. If you have more than 9, that's very good for any tank, really. Yeah, it's just a very, very good medium tank.
All right, well, moving on to the Recon tab. Okay, we'll talk about the elephant in the room first, the longbow, I think.
Don't you mean the cavalry scouts, please?
Yeah, longbow is one of the most...
Probably, it's honestly probably the most broken units, if you're being honest. I think it's only quote-unquote okay with many people because it's literally only available in one deck and literally in the US deck only. Just because it's in the US deck. If it was available to more decks or in a DLC deck, it's just simply OP. You can just kite AA that has 2800 meter range and just get into sight for a split second. You shoot your volley of Hellfires, get out, and then just fucking kill the AA. Or even against more ranged AA, if you just get line of sight or hop over a forest quickly and then get back and break line of sight somehow, if you manage to do that, there are some certain scenarios. It's simply broken.
Yeah. Hovering it at low altitude behind a forest, changing the altitude to pop it up and fire off missiles, and then changing altitude to get it back down below the tree line before guided AA is able to hit. It's also a very effective way to use it. You can just shut down pushes with it.
Yeah.
Very, very dangerous unit in the right hands. And it's another really big reason why I like to take the Patriot even in my 1v1 decks, because the natural response when an opponent sees something like a longbow is they're going to buy like a cheap plane or typically
something
what
like
you'll see happen is
Lazur,
people will buy like a Lazur or just whatever aircraft they have with Sidewinders, and they'll go after it because they're typically going to be desperate to eliminate it before it shreds whatever high value targets they have. And something like a Patriot is going to be really, really helpful for stunning those aircraft before they knock out your longbow, because a longbow is a very, very expensive unit, and as you only get 2 of them, it's pretty important you keep them alive in a US deck if you're going to succeed in the long run.
I think we should briefly mention the ACAF, which is just an okay 30-point cheap Recon vehicle that can it's a decent 5 support unit as well with 5 HE, and it's not the greatest against vehicles, but it is okay with the stealth against other IFVs that don't have good optics. It should be able to somewhat deal with them.
It can one-shot any vehicle that has 1 armor, so it can potentially deal with enemy autocannon vehicles, but it's really going to rely on that bit of RNG there that it actually is able to nail the first hit.
And the stealth when sitting in cover, really.
Yeah. Okay.
Then the Bradleys.
Yep, you have your lineup of Bradleys. I'd say either the 60 or the 80-point ones are both viable, although
you don't want the 45-point one. The base tower just can't one-shot anything up to that has more than 1 armor.
But both the 60 and 80-point ones have very good optics and medium stealth, so they can get those ATGMs working for a pretty long period of time. The 60-point Bradley is more if you need like a cheaper option, and want to be able to kill IFVs with it, and the 80-point one will hold its own against tanks quite reliably.
If you feel like you have trouble keeping your Bradleys or something alive, just use the 60-point ones, and or if you just only want it for flanks or something, you maybe also want a cheaper one because it's not a huge investment. It's just really up to you.
Navy SEALs aren't worth talking about.
No, they're trash. Rangers are just
okay.
Firestarter, use it a bit. I think it's some sort of weird deck. It's so expensive. It's just so fragile. It's just overshadowed by the longbow. Really, that's the same job but worse.
Significantly worse.
And you really have to. If you're somehow end up using it, just turn off the Hellfire and only turn it on if you actually have a target, because otherwise you're just gonna waste them. And the LV is just okay.
Rangers are
just
the best. I think they are the
probably
best.
I think I'd take Commando's power over them.
You think?
They have 1 more AP
launcher. Okay,
and they have a battle rifle.
Okay, but
also they have the VAP T20.
Okay, that's
right. They have the carbine. I forgot about that. I forgot about the carbine.
The Rangers have the carbine, so they're technically the best infantry recon shot squad for fighting.
Yes.
But yes, the Commandos parity will get the 19 AP launcher as opposed to 18, which can be significant.
Anyways, they're just very, very good.
Very good. I used to run 2 cards of them. I think it's still justifiable if you're running a US only deck, because you really, really want to get those shock infantry out. Because
especially since you get them on wheels.
If you're take a card of Rangers in the Humvee and a card of Rangers in the M35, if you're going to run the US National and use them in part as fighting infantry, because that's 12 squads of fairly affordable fighting.
I mean, you don't really need them for fighting outside the opener, I think. I think in a 1-versus-1 deck, or maybe even team decks, you might want to possibly run 1 card in the Blackhawk if you want something in a helicopter, which sometimes you want. Personally, I also prefer the Humvee over the V150. I just feel like the Recon transports aren't really worth it, because most of the time they die anyways. And for the extra 5 points, I mean, sure, you gain the 1 armor, but it's not really worth it.
Okay. LAV Scout, it's fine.
Not really great, but it's the best thing you get.
Yeah, it's a wheeled autocannon vehicle with stealth. What are you gonna?
And optics,
what's there to complain about? The one last unit I'd like to bring up is the AH-1J Cobra. I find it's better for clearing out infantry than something like the 45 or even the 60-point Cobra, just because it can spot infantry a little bit better.
I think the lag of the autocannon is. I think if it had the autocannon, it would be a lot better.
It can be tricky to fit in though in a US recon tab, just because you have so many units you want to bring in. Canada doesn't add a whole lot here.
Other than Reese.
Shut up.
In case, sorry, I have to tap now. In case you don't know, There was we played him. I don't know what exactly the scenario was, but I had Reki on the field or in my deck or something, or he had it. I don't remember. And he didn't call him Reki. He called him Reese. As a Native American who speaks English perfectly, he said Reese. And not Native American. I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. Whose mother tongue is American is what I meant.
English. I speak English, not American.
It's the same thing, and not the same thing, but I mean American English.
Pathfinders are 25-point elite Recon infantry, and they
with a terrible
also
entertainment weapon.
But they have a shitty MG and shitty AT, so I avoid them like
yeah,
the plague.
I think the MG is even a shock version, unless they fixed it. But again, I mean, sometimes like I don't think Reki is like terrible to tank. Sometimes you just want a very stealthy.
That is in fact the shock version of the MG.
Yeah.
Same stats as the Canadian Airborne. Interesting.
But
yeah, nothing really interesting there.
it used to be the only
Reki is probably the only notable thing because they have the KE tag on their sniper rifle.
And sometimes
it's
nice
for tagging CVs.
And sometimes it can be nice to just have an exceptional Recon infantry, which can be are just very, very hard to detect. And honestly, I think they're a bit underrated. I feel it's just very hard to put into a Recon tab in NORAD.
Yep. Vehicle tab. CS.
Yes, CS.
One really, really wonderful fire support unit.
Fire support, base defense.
You get the defense. CV as well for infantry fire support.
Very good, both of them.
I like the Ontos. It doesn't see a whole lot of use because it's not great autonomy and speed.
It used to be It used to be meta when it was 15 points.
But I've had some really good times pairing up like an Ontos or two behind some infantry and then popping super heavies and from forests, just pulling them out. It's pretty hilarious, really, really satisfying to use. And because they fire off those 6 shots in pretty rapid succession, they can still be used to pretty good effect to support infantry assaults.
You also get a ghetto AMX-10 in terms of with the V150 76mm. Don't take it though, it's trash.
No, shitty RPM, poor accuracy, bad range, terrible AP. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Not with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. That's about it. I mean,
yeah.
What else is there? You have your ATGM vehicles.
The combat, but it has lackluster RPM.
You know, the Lavat is actually, looking at it, it's not in a terrible spot. You get the ITO on a wheeled chassis for 40 points.
Probably already have Bradleys.
Yeah, it's unnecessary.
And then you'll probably want the CV or the CS or something.
You know, it might be interesting to take in a wheeled opener though.
Didn't you try that before and it didn't really work out? The problem is just ATGMs in general, the aim time, the fly time. It just makes them awkward to use, especially in the opener when things can be hectic and you lose line of sight every 2 seconds.
Fair. All right. Canadian vehicles here.
I think the Chimera is a bit underrated.
Nothing great. Underrated? I don't know.
I would only really take it in the mech deck because it comes in mechanized.
Fixed forward, you're gonna get yourself side shotted. Poor optics.
I still think it's underrated because I don't think it's as terrible as people make it out to be.
Vehicle tab though, which is significant.
I'd only take it in the mech deck, but I don't think it's as bad as people sometimes make it out to be.
In a mech deck, I'd take it up at 4 at veteran, 110 points, decent package, but still.
They're terrible to attack with, but like for holding a position, they're gonna be just fine. But for 5 points more than Challenger 1, you get 2 more AP and 1 more front armor. And Challenger 1 isn't a bad tank, the Mark 1. So I think again in a mech deck, or maybe in some very weird unspec deck potentially, but I don't think it's as terrible. But at the same price as the LV80, you get the Iltis Tau 2, which is a Jeep with Tau 2 instead of Lighthouse. You only get 4 of them, but I think the Tau 2 Jeeps that you get for 40 points aren't really that terrible. But I think the issue is, again, you can't fit them in.
The main thing about the Lavat, though, in comparison with something like those cheap Jeeps, is the fact that you get not only 10 HP instead of 5 HP, and you get 1 front armor as opposed to 0, which means you can take a lot more autocannon fire. And for like a wheeled opener. I mean, it's like getting 1-shotted as opposed to taking 4 shots. That's a huge difference, especially when you're dealing with the flight time of the ATGM. So something like the Lavat could potentially pick off 2 to 3 autocannon vehicles in the opener, whereas something like an Ito might connect 1, if any, before getting taken out.
Yeah, but the Ilto Sato actually does damage to heavy tanks.
That's true. Alright, helicopters.
Well, the
Super
dab
Cobra.
is
Super
Super Cobra.
TOE2s. It's fun.
I
Try it
like
sometime,
I've said
maybe.
it earlier to Nick before the video. I like it for 10 versus 10s, for these high point 10 versus 10s where people are just trash and don't micro their radar AA. Some easy points to get to make there. Outside of that, it's not really useful.
60-point Cobra for that cheap autocannon can
Yeah.
be nice for shutting down infantry and light vehicles on the flanks.
Yeah, never take the
TOE will also
45-point Cobra.
Yeah, avoid
A lot
the
of people take the
45-point
45-point Cobra because it's cheap rocket pods, but for 15 points more, you actually gain the ability to effectively deal with light vehicles. And even once you run out of your rocket pods and your towers, you still have the autocannon if you don't have the time or the supply to refill it. So it's still gonna be useful after that. It's just worth the 15 points. Trust us.
I rather like the Apache, but I couldn't fit it into a NORAD deck just because we already have the longbow and you have other alternatives. In a mixed deck, though, they can be nice to have. The Little Bird and the DAP are two also nice units. I
Little Bird
always
is
take
just
the DAP
underrated,
in my
I
US
think.
deck for flexible AA. And Little Bird can be nice. It's just it can be tough to fit in with activation points.
Yeah, but the DAB is just one of the arguably the best AA helicopter. It's fast. It has medium optics. It's affordable, and once you're out of stingers, the twin M230s can do a shit ton of damage. They just don't have a turret, so you need some time to line up your helicopter, but they can do a shit ton of damage. And with the 300 kilometer speed and the medium size, meaning you have good acceleration, the range on the stingers is not really a huge deal as compared to Iglas or something, because you can close the gap and close the range so fast that it's not really a big deal.
I guess the last unit that's really worth bringing up is the Seahawk.
I mean,
80 points for 4 Hellfires. It's not a lot of ammunition, but
I don't think it's very
cheap
great.
enough that you can.
80 points is not really that cheap though, and 4 Hellfires you have to micro it because
For Hellfires though, you could totally pay that off.
I mean, then you might as well
difficulty.
take the Recon Kiowa
also...
with the exceptional optics.
Yeah, but then you have the 6 HP versus 4 HP, whereas the.
But you're also small.
Yeah, but you're a lot likely to get nailed by like what LSTR.
Yeah, but then you might as well
like
take the Apache, right?
Maybe, but that's like a 50% price hike over the Seahawk.
Or if you're playing in mixed decks, you're taking like a 55-point Fennec with the Tau 2. And I don't think the Seahawk is very great, to be honest. I don't like it.
I had some good use against Faust with it while playing mixed blue, actually. But I don't know. I tend to fuck around with helicopters a lot more than
bad
you do.
units? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that I think between you and I can probably get a lot more out of a Seahawk than you can, just because I'm a lot more used to abusing helicopters. Yeah, abusing helicopters, I think is the right word. Yeah, okay. As far as Canada goes,
they do get the amazing
rocket pods
SS-11
but...
helicopter.
Uh-huh.
In all seriousness, the heat rocket
Canadian
pods
helicopters
are a little meme that they're honestly not that terrible.
On pretty high.
They're just very inconsistent because I only get 14 rockets. Sometimes 1 or 2 of them just fuck up the super heavy. Other times they don't do jack shit.
I think you'll like also pretty much instantly stun any.
I don't think they stun very much just because you only have 14. I think to effectively and they have a rather low rate of fire compared to other rocket pods. They are very cost efficient against tanks, actually. If you use them. The problem is just you can't get them into range, into position. Yeah. They're slow. They're easy to kill.
Well, and 4 HP. I wouldn't bother to bring them in a deck that has so many other helicopter options that are more viable.
Yeah, only bring them in when you want to meme, but they're a fun little unit, honestly. They're bad, but they're fun.
Aircraft.
Oh yeah, US has such terrible planes, don't you know? Oh, I like it.
52 is a excellent card for aircraft, very, very reliable at knocking out enemy planes. Sea Eagle,
It's just an okay elite
it's
ASF.
okay. Yeah, it's a little awkward for 1v1s
It's
because you only get one if you
yeah,
upvet it, but
a bit better than the Eurofighter because
yeah.
you have a better gun. You have worse turn radius, but I think having a Vulcan over 300 turn radius is better. Especially if you end up being in a scenario where you are forced to use it against helicopters. That's where a Vulcan can actually make a huge difference.
Yeah. I'd definitely just grab the Block 52 though. It's
Yeah.
reliable.
You could take the F-15A in 1-on-1 versus 1 because you get 2 on veteran. It's not great, but it's workable.
I'd still shell out for the Block 52. Air superiority is really important.
Yeah,
in
but
a
when you're
NORAD
using
deck
a
'cause you
Patriot, you don't really
wanna...
need the best ASF.
Okay, fair. Still though,
Got you there, bitch.
I know, but I'd really
no. The Block
go
52
for air
is just
superiority in a NORAD deck. You want to be able to abuse your Nighthawks and your Thunderbolt, and you want to be able to get that longbow working out on the field. I would actually really strongly recommend taking a rocket pod aircraft in a NORAD deck as well. Just
for 1
for
versus
sniping.
1.
Yeah, sorry, for 1 versus 1. Most of my advice is catering towards 1 versus 1, honestly. But something like the AV-8C Harrier is great for diving helicopters and great for sniping AA, which will allow you to get a lot more utility.
It's actually one of the weaknesses of NORAD or US generally is that your aircraft are often too expensive for diving helicopters, or the cheap ones don't have the short range missiles, which is why the Harrier basically you get both the rocket pod and the helo diver in one plane, which is nice.
Yep. Harrier's 750 km/h speed here is actually a benefit because it allows them to get both of their missiles off while diving a aircraft as opposed to some like 1,000 km/h aircraft.
Yeah. Then you mentioned the Thunderbolt is just very strong, especially in 1 versus 1 because of the 2 armor. Makes it so survivable.
Yep. Super Hornet's also great for knocking out tanks.
It's actually not the Super Hornet. The Super Hornet is actually...
Sorry, the F-18C.
Yes. The Super Hornet, probably the best overall anti-tank plane because unlike the SC-27M, you get 2 per card. 40% ECM, 430 AP missiles, just very good.
Yep. Very good unit to have.
For seaplanes, you either want the Raven or the Prowler. I think in 1 versus 1, personally, I prefer the Prowler because it's cheaper and you get 2 of them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Raven's also a nice unit, but I'd probably only bring it out in higher point 10v10 games just because it's...
Or team games.
Yeah,
I think 1 versus 1s I wouldn't use it. If I'm not wrong, I think the Raven's seed missiles also take longer to reload, but I'm not 100% certain on that, so take that with a grain of salt. The D-Eagle is honestly not really worth taking, but I think it's also something that people might want to look at if they're newer to the game.
It's a pretty decent iron bomber.
It is, but the problem is you get only 1 per card, and for the price, like the F111C is just so much better because it's cheaper and you get 2 per card, right?
Yeah,
and
it's expensive for what it offers.
Yeah, very expensive and inefficient, card inefficient.
Be better off doing something like taking the Nighthawk and using that as your bomber, just because you're going to get a lot more effectiveness out of it.
Alternatively,
especially
honestly,
if you're able to shut down your opponent's
the Napalm Phantom is also honestly a very good plane in my opinion. It doesn't kill outright, but it denies area, it blocks off bridges, or just kills over time. It is relatively survivable for the price. It even comes with sidewinders to potentially kill planes, or helicopters mostly. It's honestly not that bad, but I think the US is just so overloaded in the air tab that sometimes or often you won't see that, but I think it's worth trying out.
Also, something to note with the Nighthawk, all LGBs have 50% accuracy, regardless of there's no like quality difference. Any any guided bombs currently at 50% accuracy, but all of
It
them
comes on
have
elite.
range accuracy scaling,
Yeah,
meaning
but
if you wait to target your opponent's vehicle until you're like 3,000 meters out or 2,500 meters out, your accuracy is going to scale up quite significantly, meaning you can
I
much
wouldn't do
more
that though.
reliably
Not with the Nighthawk.
nail your opponents. I mean, you need to be
Nighthawk has
careful with
0% ECM. And it
That's
already comes at
true.
elite, which massively boosts the accuracy. But
Mhm.
I think with the Nighthawk you want to get out ASAP. Because the only thing that keeps the Nighthawk alive is its stealth, which means that very often, unless there's an ASAP out, the Nighthawk won't be spotted until it's already starting to evac.
Still, I'd keep the fact that accuracy scales up in mind.
Yeah, I mean,
If
it's good to
If
know.
you're in a situation where you absolutely 100% need to knock out your opponent's T80 UM with zero room for error, flying in a Nighthawk, waiting a little bit after it's already in range, and then targeting position is going to get you a 100% chance of kill.
I think
which is
it's
important.
gonna be a bit awkward with the Nighthawk though, because when you turn off the paveway or the bomb, you can't target the
No, you don't.
tank
You don't
anymore.
need. So
Yeah,
here's the
I
thing,
know.
guys.
But the thing is, if you're doing that with something like, say, the Kerners are still directly flying to the target and even slightly diving it because of its gun. And keeping, if the target is moving, still keeping the right angle and shit, right? But if you're doing it with Nighthawk, it's just gonna fly directly onwards to where it was just flying, which has to be kept in mind. Which may
And I
result in
suppose
it being
it'll
at
take
an
a bit.
angle if you don't pay attention that makes the bombs bug out a bit or something.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take you a bit of practice to do it
Yes,
right
yes.
consistently, I suppose. But
But be careful with doing
it's
that
not
when
too
you're using the
difficult.
Nighthawk.
Yeah, it can be risky, but if you need to get both bombs on target, it can be useful. I think
Alright,
that just about covers it for U.S. aircraft.
one thing, short, the 120 point cluster artwork is actually not a terrible cluster plane. Again, you don't really need it in US because you have so many anti-tank tools, but it's not that terrible plane, honestly. It's like the Danish F-16, but it has more ECM.
And loses gun and sidewinders, but
Yes,
sure.
but 20% extra ECM is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Or 5 points more.
Okay, fair.
But yeah, it's just a little side note.
Canadian aircraft.
Voodoo.
The Voodoo's excellent, honestly. In a 1v1 deck, you have.
Do you take it on hardened
tight
or
turn
elite though?
radius. I would probably take him at. Sorry,
Probably
hardened or elite?
elite?
You mean rookie or veteran, right?
No,
The
no.
Voodoo?
You get 6 rookie, 5 trained, 4 hardened, 3 elite.
Oh my God! You're talking about that plane.
Oh,
I thought
that
you were talking about the
voodoo. Yes,
electric
I'm
Voodoo. I
talking
thought you were
about
talking
that
about the
voodoo.
Super.
The
No,
mean voodoo.
I wouldn't touch that plane.
It
Honestly, it's
honestly, it is not that
it's
terrible.
25. It's 25% accuracy. What are you talking about?
You know what's a big deal?
Hmm.
The Falcon reloads after takes 1 second to reload. Every mid and high tier short range missiles takes 2 seconds, meaning it can easily get 2 off on a helicopter.
Hmm.
And against helicopters, I'm pretty sure there is range scaling. So if you want a very cheap and somewhat reliable pure anti-helicopter plane, 3 on elite, honestly, it's not really great or less reliable, but I think it's not that terrible. It's still memey, but
I don't think
I
I
think
could justify taking it in a NORAD
maybe
Raz, and I
my
think you know that too. Have you ever actually
not.
used the
I
unit?
wouldn't really use it in an art deck unless I'm like playing like some sort of semi-fun deck or something.
So
And
the only
maybe
deck you'd be using it
my
in
memory
is
is
in
playing.
Canadian National.
Maybe my memory is playing some tricks on me, and it's actually worse than I remember it. But I think it's also not as bad as it looks on first glance. You also have to remember it's a 45 point plane.
Okay.
But the actual voodoo that everyone actually takes, the seed voodoo.
Yeah, the seed voodoo, I'd say, is one of the
good.
main reasons. It's a good reason to go for NORAD over US.
But I think I'd always take it on veteran. Or only on rookie if you're playing team games and you have the points to buy 2 at the same time. But on rookie, it's so unreliable, which is why I prefer the Prowler or the Raven. And if you're taking on veteran, you only get 1 of them. And having only 1 seed plane can sometimes be a pain in the ass, because when you lose to some bad RNG or something, you might be fucked for the rest of the game.
Canadian ASF Hornet be quite nice for 1v1
For 1
games.
versus 1. Probably better than the Eagle, yeah. Mainly because it has
Yeah.
5 and 6 HE on the missiles, meaning that any combination of the two can kill a plane unless you get very, very unlucky. Whereas the F-15A has 4 HE on the Sidewinders and 6 HE on the long-range missiles, meaning that only 2 Sidewinder hits won't kill a plane.
Mhm.
Which is a rare scenario because you still have the Vulcan at nearly shortly after you are in range for the missiles, but there are these cases where this actually makes a difference.
Mhm. All right.
And then one last thing for the Freedom Fighter, 70 points. It isn't survivable, but for 70 points in 3 per card, actually a lot of firepower or bombing power, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So that's valid. There's no reason to take the 70-point Starfighter, though. The 80-point AV-8C Harrier is going to do the same job more reliably.
I would have taken it if it had better Sidewinders, trading basically ECM for cheaper price and the Vulcan as opposed to an Aiden, but its short-range missiles are just bad.
All right, I think that about covers it, yeah?
Fucking 70 minutes, dude.
Christ. Actually? That's actually ridiculous.
I think it's just because you're two with different views.
Yep. All right.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say?
I don't know. I guess while we're on the while we're talking about the air tab, how would you build your NORAD air tab for like a 1v1 deck?
For a 1 versus 1, assuming I have the Patriot because I don't really have anything else in my deck right now. It's honestly a toss-up between the Block 52 and the Hornet. And I'm just gonna put in the Block 52 now. I'm definitely gonna take the Nighthawk. I'm definitely gonna take the Thunderbolt because Thunderbolt can bully people so much in 1 versus 1s.
Yeah. Also, the Thunderbolt pairs really well with the Longbow and the Electric Voodoo, because cheap seed is really important just because you can spot radar AA if it's turned on, even if it's not facing towards it. You can like loiter the Electric Voodoo and the Thunderbolt while you have the Longbow move up.
Although I'm not, I would
targets.
Personally, I'm not gonna use the Voodoo. I'm using the Prowler.
The Prowler, that's fine.
And then lastly, probably either the Phantom or the Rocket Pod Harrier.
Yeah. I'd personally opt for the Rocket Pod Harrier.
Probably gonna go with the Phantom.
You could utilize the Thunderbolt to knock out AA as well, just because you can dive it pretty reliably. But
another reason for the Phantom is just because if I was to build the deck right now, I'd just wanted to try out the Phantom. Because I haven't used it in a while. Anything different for you other than the Rocket Pod Harrier?
I'd probably opt for the Voodoo just because better ECM and
no, it has the same ECM as the Prowler. It's just faster, I think.
Yeah, it's faster
and cheaper, of course.
Tighter turn radius, slightly.
Yeah, slightly.
So it's a little bit more survivable, I think, because of the speed and the turn radius. And it's cheaper.
And it looks cooler.
That too. It does look very cool. But I'd probably go with the Nighthawk. Just kind of a US flavor essential unit. I'd bring the Thunderbolt. I'd bring the Harrier for sniping AA. And I'd bring the Voodoo. And I'd probably bring
the Block or the Hornet.
I think that's kind of a toss-up. I could go back between those two. I think I'd probably bring the Block 52 just because of the...
I don't forget.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the main reason why you change either of them is if you somewhat knew the kind of matchup you were facing up against or the player, right?
Yeah, and whether or not you thought you would need the AA quality.
Yeah.
All right, well, we really should wrap this up because this has gone on way longer than I think either of us originally intended.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you, Nick, for joining me. And thank you guys for watching. Nick's channel will obviously be in the description. Maybe he will also upload a video.
Start uploading things again. We'll see.
Don't forget to check out his Patreon. Send him all your money.
All right. See you guys. Thanks for tuning in.
See you guys. Thanks for watching.